So in this segment, we're going to be talking about one area where Brexit should deliver benefits in theory. So this is a Financial Times article. It is a bit... It's a bit hard to explain. It feels like it's a bit satirical in a sense, but it's looking for a Brexit benefit. So it's worth looking at. So the phrase Brexit benefits has become increasingly politically loaded over the past 2 years for Brexiteers. It's a... I'm not sure what that word is. Something to cling to. For Remainers, a self-evident oxymoron, which is true. They are desperately trying to explain Brexit benefits. They're putting spin and lies on trade, amongst other things, so it's just a bit embarrassing. There aren't many benefits of Brexit. Even sovereignty is not really a win. We deregulate and we risk losing the trade and cooperation agreement, so not great. But there is one area of post-Brexit policy which does hold out the prospect of delivering a tangible benefit from leaving the EU single market: subsidy control, or Brussels calls state aid. More socialism. It kind of doesn't. The UK tried to favour companies using mostly UK labour laws over EU competitors, and we were sued by the EU under WTO state aid laws. So that sovereignty does not really exist. The WTO has rules around state aid. The issues are that the WTO is a very political court, and if you try and drag someone to court, they can also try and do the same to you, like an old school Mexican standoff. So the idea that we can just state aid our way through the wazoo is simply not true, especially in the particular way the UK was doing it, because they wanted to look at companies favouring UK labour. Even the most die-hard Remainer should accept that the UK, outside the cumbersome and bureaucratic system of Brussels-administrated subsidy control, has the capacity to administer grants in a nimble, more targeted way. Potentially, yes, but it does open us up to more cronyism, see PPE scandal. Also, the level up schemes are not working. I think they are as complex or more complex than EU bid procurement rules. I'm actually wrong about that, that's not true. The UK rules are much simpler. But I'm not even sure how complex the EU rules are, I'll be honest. I've not tried to bid for any EU contracts, unfortunately. After all, is why the EU fretted so hard over the so-called level playing field issues during the 2020 trade deal negotiations, that you were very careful about state aid rules. But that's normally based off WTO rules anyways. Done right, a bespoke UK regime should be to the benefit of investors, businesses, quangos and local authorities charged with using local grant money to deliver better outcomes for their areas, attracting a battery factory, greening the grid, improving community health outcomes and so on. There are so many issues with this paragraph. Even if you got this mythical way of ensuring that the money's spent properly, we have Britishvolt, which is a UK startup, which is struggling to even fully get built. They make electric vehicle batteries, so the ones they plug into the cars to get them going. It's a gigafactory or something like that. The other issue is that car manufacturing is leaving the UK, so who will even buy the batteries? Exporting them to the EU would be difficult because of rules of origins. And that's not even with us being sued over state aid rules and keeping the TCA. Rules of origin still exist. That's a huge problem because lithium is not local to the UK, unfortunately. So that's a problem. Also, a lot of the construction is going towards, the car manufacturing is going towards Slovakia, and car makers typically want a gigafactory nearby, and gigafactories typically want car factories nearby, so then they can trade easy with each other. At least that's the theory, the earlier paragraph in italics, that, we'd be able to get all these great schemes. But will it? Well, with the announcement last month opens a new window. That post-Brexit subsidy regime will finally kick in from January 4th, 2023, which is really close, actually. We're about to find out, and I might have jumped the gun with my meanness, but we'll see where the author goes. I normally do these paragraph by paragraph. Business Minister Dean Russell trumpeted the new British system with the customary Johnsonian hyperbole. I love how Johnsonian is a phrase. Promising the UK scheme would provide a big boost for businesses and further impetus behind the government's plans to supercharge economic growth, even though we're heading towards a recession, or we're in one already. As ever, take all that with a pinch of salt, but if the new system works as planned, it should make life easier. In turn, it should lead to some tangible benefits, at least to partly offset the costs of leaving the EU single market. But it's not going to offset the costs because we took a 4% hit to GDP. But go on. The new UK scheme is intended to be simpler and better tailored to UK domestic needs. To do this, Brussels has a system of so-called block exemptions, a list of 60 or so categories, and this is where I almost fell asleep because it's very complicated. So I'll try and break it down a bit. The EU system is pretty confusing, but it looks like it's contingent on bid writing plus checks and balances. More based on need rather than pork barrel politics. The UK already commits to do a lot of pork barrel politics where their money goes to Tory safe seats and swing seats. Of course, this is done to win these seats / keep them, and it's open to cronyism. The EU system makes that a lot harder to do. Under the new UK rules, grants up to 315,000 would be dished out pretty much freely, with all the awards over 100,000 to be added to a transparency database to ensure appropriate use of taxpayers' money, which we know this is mostly bogus. There will also be 3 streamlined routes for larger awards covering energy usage, R&D funding and local growth. These are effectively the UK equivalent of the EU's block exemption. Importantly, explains subsidy lawyer Alexander Rose at the law firm DWF, the UK system is designed to be fundamentally permissive. It turns the prescriptive EU system on its head. So rather than always seeking permission to give a grant, as in the EU system, so you have to bid right on all of these things, and then eventually you're lucky if you get it, the UK system is more likely to give you the money up front, but then there are issues with that. Unless it's found in a court to have breached those 7 principles via a judicial review at the Competition Appeal Tribunal. So the UK has 7 principles for dishing out grants, and once you've successfully gotten the money, it can go to court via a tribunal, and the money can get tied up for a while. For the big awards that exceed 10 million over 3 years, the UK system does require granting bodies to refer them to a new subsidy advice unit, so they're setting up multiple different layers of bureaucracy, even though we're against that. We don't know who's going to be on this tribunal, but given the Tories' track record, probably not great, and again, the cost of lawyers could be tremendous. They claim it would be quick, but how quick? They're claiming within months. You might save time in handing out the money, but face delays in spending it. Also, imagine being a council who received the funding, everyone celebrates, then boom, you lost it in a tribunal. It's just madness. So essentially they'll give you the money unless someone challenges you once you have it. So you say to all your kids, here's a tenner. If any of the other kids call you out and say, I deserve that money more, it's yours, effectively, which is not a great system. This is the theory, anyways, or some of my theory. Will it work? Well, it's worth remembering the UK system is considerably more structured than some of the Brexiteer politicians wanted. Indeed, during the Brexit negotiations for the TCA, some in the UK system argued for no formal regime at all. That would just be a giveaway to areas that are just ran by Tories, let's be honest now. It's definitely not a total free-for-all. Indeed, according to DWF Analytics, the new UK regime actually goes significantly further than what's required under the TCA, which is typically based on, again, WTO rules, which demonstrates the UK wants a balanced competition regime. As Jacob Rees-Mogg put it earlier this year when he was business secretary, the new regime seeks to strike a sensible balance between allowing public authorities greater freedom to grant subsidies while protecting the interests of taxpayers. And in my opinion, I just don't know if it does do it, if it will be balanced. On the positive side, the new regime, now it has been clarified, should be an improvement on the past 2 years where granting authorities were left with something of a limbo, having to make judgments on whether grants did or did not meet according with the principles agreed under the TCA. Essentially, it's a bit of a free-for-all. It was not great, and the subsidy programme we have now is still not fully gone yet. It's not fully done. The uncertainty, rather than unleashing the benefits of the Brexit beast, led to surprising amounts of dither and delay, which the Tories love, even though they accuse Labour of it all the time. But lawyers like Rose and James Webber, again, this stuff can get quite confusing. These are a partner in an antitrust practice at Shearman and Sterling, say this can change, but that much will come down to the implementation of the UK system. Can it deliver what it practices on paper, which is a much easier system with less bureaucracy, but also court cases on the back end? One concern for Rose is whether the CMA's new advice unit will be able to handle referrals as quickly, a few months as intended. He argues that £10 million is not that high a threshold, so a fair number of grants will be referred. If a backlog starts to form, that will lead to a major backlog. This board itself will require funding. Different areas are very complex, so would they have different tribunals for different regions? How will they filter for bias and corruption? Also, what if one of the bids faces multiple referrals by different councils? They'd have to unpick each referral, which would take more than months depending on how the tribunals are set up. And him saying that 10 million isn't a lot of money in funding, so that will already go to referrals before being dished out anyways. They'll have a look over it to see if it's who they're going to hand it out to, etc., rather than allowing open bids. A recent Public Accounts Committee report on regulators adjusting to the post-Brexit world raised a possible alarm by noting challenges the CMA was facing with recruiting lawyers and economists when they could get paid a lot more elsewhere. We have done reasonably well so far, but it's an ongoing concern, is how a senior CMA executive put it to the committee. Competing with the private sector is not easy, especially when just for the initial bid, you might need to pay for experts to help write the bid, despite the grants being easier to get over the EU system. The second area of concern is whether it would be streamlined, which are very broad. The streamlined routes, which are very broad and were drawn up without proper consultation, according to Rose. Shock. But will that actually improve the regime rather than limit or complicate it? For Weber, I mean, again, I don't disagree with Weber at all, who consistently argued for a permissive UK regime that doesn't slip back into repeating the problems of the EU system, which is far more protectionist. In the past 2 years since the TCA, where there was no regime at all, other than a requirement to adhere to the several broad principles on subsidies agreed with the EU, Weber concedes that granting bodies didn't rush to use their new freedoms. Instead, we saw what he calls a race to the bottom on cautiousness that demonstrate that the UK hasn't really gone out of the, quote, psychological and cultural barriers of leaving the EU. I mean, this guy's a joke, I'll be honest. Again, you need to strike a balance here. Having a system built on judicial reviews, in my opinion, is a bad idea. Him saying the UK should have much more freedom, be much more easy with referrals and things like that, I think is a joke. I think having a similar system to the EU makes sense. Having it based on bids, it makes sense, rather than tying this up in tribunals and courts. Time will tell on this point. Part of the issue will be educating authorities on the system, which will take time, which is why the business department is running a series of online and in-person workshops ahead of the January 4th launch to help get granting bodies into the swing of things. And I do wonder how much effort they've put in, given that Rees-Mogg has been taken out of the cabinet, so that's the responsibility of someone else now to sort out all this levelling up stuff, which has not gone smoothly with the UK. A lot of councils, I think, especially the ones that their constituencies voted Brexit, really preferred EU subsidies because work would have happened by now, and they haven't. Especially if you're in Cornwall, where you've lost almost £100 million in subsidies. I'm sure they're very happy with that in Cornwall, because at least, as when I covered it at the time, one commenter said, at least they'll be sovereign to spend that money how they want. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. I know this article was quite confusing. It took me a while to kind of really figure out what this guy was talking about. But let me know what you thought in the comments below, if there's anything you want to add to this, which no doubt some people will want to. Let me know in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.